It's another episode of Rental House versus High Income ETFs. It's episode 9.0. So this would be the wrap up for the month of June. And I'm happy to say that I'm happy. We'll get to that. So I'm wearing my GIAX hat, which they nicely had sent me a few months ago. So thank you, GIAX. I don't get anything special for mentioning GIAX, except for they sent me a hat. So thank you for that. So let's get going and we'll see how we're doing. Just a brief reminder, if you're new to these videos, we sold our rental houses, or most of our rental houses. One of the last houses we sold, we took the proceeds, $70,000, and put them into high income ETFs, covered call ETFs. So I'm in Northwest Illinois. So Northwest Illinois, you can buy little 2, 3 bedroom rental houses for, you could buy them for 70,000. Now they're probably more like 85 to 90,000. So let's get going here. And if you are enjoying this series of videos and like to keep up with what's going on each week, you can subscribe. That'd make me happy, but not as happy as how my ETFs are doing this month. So let's jump in, and it's been busy. It's been a busy week. So let's get going here. So we started out with $70,000, and as of today, we have 76,802 and some change. Pretty good. We are using margin. I look at margin as if I'm getting a home equity line of credit on rental property. I'm not afraid of margin, just like I wasn't afraid to borrow money on the rental property to perhaps buy more rental property. And if you knew, we had rental properties for 35 years. We still have some rental property, but majority of it, we sold it and we are recently retired. When we travel, me and my wife, we don't want to be on the Alaskan highway or somewhere and get a phone call or text message saying that sewer line was plugged up or something. So that's why we sold the rental property. Plus, I've been doing covered calls myself for a while as a hobby. And when these covered call ETFs came out, I decided to let professionals do the covered call, write the cover call options for me rather than me trying to do it myself. Even though I was doing okay, I had a little bit of anxiety. At the time, I had my regular full-time job, so I was like cheating my job by going and watching options and doing some analysis and those types of things. So anyhow, back to the video here. So we're sitting at 76,000, 68,000 in margin. So what exactly do we own? I'll go by what we started with. We started out with QDTE, and I ended up with 2,700 shares of QDTE. Then I got excited about AIPI at 35% return. That got me excited. So we started adding some AIPI, and then we got a free hat from GIAX. So I bought some GIAX. Actually, I already own the GIAX, and they sent me the hat later. So when GIX took a dip down in the $14 range, I bought 300 more shares. Since then, it's come back up to 1768. So my average cost is 1637. So total return on that's pretty good. More recently, I started buying SPYI, and a few weeks ago, I bought some QQQI. The reason why I didn't start out with SPYI and QQQI is because I own quite a few shares of that in my after-tax regular account that we dip into to supplement our retirement income. Since we already had a lot of shares invested in those already, I didn't want to keep piling on. I figured this account would be something good to diversify with. We've had SPYI for well over a year, and QQQI since it came out. And that's probably been about a year ago, maybe not quite. And I like the way they've been performing. You get a fixed return, not a fixed return, but a pretty consistent return, about 12% for SPYI and about 14% for QQQI. plus the price appreciation. So I like that. You can see AIPI and QDTE both have not recovered 100% from what I paid for it back a while back. So even though the NAV is not recovered, the total return, I'm doing okay with AIPI and QDTE, and that's why I don't sell it. And in fact, if you figure return on cost, AIPI, for example, even though it's a 35% return on what the value is today, I'm probably getting about a 30% return on what I paid for it. So not the 35%, but I'm still getting 30%. So what I'm getting at, if I sold this today and reinvested that money into something else, could I get 30% return on something else? Maybe not. Same thing with QDTE. Could I sell some of this, invest it, and get like 25 to 30% on something else? Maybe not. Maybe I could. I just want to keep it simple and keep invested in this. And hopefully the NAV will slowly appreciate, or even if it goes sideways, I don't care as long as it doesn't go down. But isn't that what everybody hopes for? So, anyhow, this is what I'm holding. And so, this slide here is something I just like to keep an eye on the market in general. So, this is the SPY, the S&P 500. And I put this here a while back. The all-time high was 613.23 back on 2/19/2025. You can see it closed today at 614.91. So we have a new all-time high. And my observation is that the price has broken out of the Bollinger Band. So what that's telling me is that it could keep flying higher. And most things in the news have been positive lately. It depends how you look at things, but in general, it's been positive. The relative strength index is 68, so it's starting to get a little bit oversold. My concern is that we might have some red days next week, but overall, I think we're still going to be going up. The 20-day moving average has been going up since May. So I think we're in good shape. I think we're going to continue going. I think this year, I think we might end up being like a 25, 30% year for the S&P 500. So I'm pretty bullish. I'm optimistic in general. And sometimes that gets me in trouble. But anyhow, I don't make the news. I just report it. Let's keep going. I have not bought any new shares of anything for about 3 weeks. The last thing I bought was QQQI, which turned out to be a good thing, kind of at its high, but I just got excited one day and bought 100 shares of it. When my margin gets paid down, I'll look at buying something else. Okay, we'll go to the next slide here. So, what's happened in the past weeks? I said a lot has been going on this past week. So, I got some distributions from pretty much everything. So, let's start down here at the bottom. The first thing I got yesterday was $764 from AIPI monthly distribution. Now, some people call these dividends. I don't really call them dividends because I think of a dividend as like profit from a stock, and then they pay the shareholders part of the profit. So these are income that's earned off the covered calls. And so I call them more like distributions. So they're distributing the profit from the covered calls. And if you don't know what covered calls are, I have another video about what is a covered call. And there's tons of videos about covered calls. And really, covered calls, in my opinion, are the easiest things to understand when you want to start getting a little bit fancier in the stock market rather than just buy and hold things. So by dealing with covered calls and cash secured puts, you can, in my opinion, you can take whatever return you're getting. So let's say the S&P 500, you're averaging 12% per year. And by doing covered calls, you might be able to squeeze out another 1%, 15, 20% per year, the S&P 500, if you are good at it. SPYI, they seem to be pretty good at it. And SPYI is they write covered calls on the S&P 500. So they write the covered calls in such a way that it's somewhat conservative, So you still get appreciation, but then you're also getting like that 1% per month off the covered calls, which in my opinion is somewhat conservative because when I sell covered calls, I'm trying to be greedy, try to get 1% per week. Maybe that's why I'm not good at it because I'm too greedy. But anyhow, SPYI, QQQI, or both GIAX, in my opinion, those are some pretty good ones. And there's a lot of good ones, but there's a lot of bad ones. But you don't know till it's too late sometimes. So this is what's happened. I got the AIPI, $62 from QQQI, $100 from the SPYI. I got $665 this week from QDTE and $179 from GIAX. I've been buying so many shares of different ETFs, I'm forgetting what's what. But so here's the history. This was last month, April, of everything. This is each month going back to November. I started this in November. And you can see I had some good months. December was a good month, but I think because of tax reasons, some of the ETFs had to pay out extra to avoid paying tax, maybe capital gains things. You look at it, things, it's pretty consistent between about 3,000 to 3,500. Actually, this month is one of my lowest months, or no, April was my lowest month. May was 3,663, and then this month is 2,900. Now, last month was extra because QDTE pays weekly every Friday. So in May, there was 5 Fridays. So I got an extra payment from QDTE. The other ones pay once per month. SPYI, AIPI, GIX, and then actually down here, QQQI, because I just recently bought that, they pay once a month. So that's why back here in May, I had a little bit extra because I had an extra payment. If QDTE averages about $600, which it might, it's probably around that range, $500 to $600. That will explain why this is 3,600, and down here it's 2,900, and the month before was like 2,900, and the month before that was 3,000. So in January, it must have been an extra Friday in there also. So we're looking at about $3,000 per month on average. At the beginning of this project, I projected what would happen. So I made the spreadsheet, start with 70,000. I guesstimated that my fund would grow about 0.75 of 1% per week. That sounds pretty aggressive, doesn't it? So originally I was doing this once a month and people were asking me in between how things were going. And so I was actually updating this every week for myself. And so I just decided to start doing these videos every week and was keeping track of everything weekly anyhow. So that's why I was doing 3.5% per month. And then down here, I started doing weekly. So originally I thought I'd start with 70,000, and down here is where we're at. I thought by now I'd be sitting in a cool 90,000, and I'd be using 68,000 in margin, and I'd have a total invested margin plus my equity, 158,000. And this is how much it grows per week. This is the total that it would have grown since back in November, back up here. And the 75% represents the amount of margin I'm using compared to how much cash I had in there. So 68,000 and whatever is 75% of 90,795. All looks pretty good. Great plan. I like it. But over here is actually what's happening. So what really happened, I started at 70,000. I started with 50,000 in margin. I start buying the QDTE. Things were going great. Look here, within a month and a half, I was up almost $10,000, like 13% in 1 month. And I was thinking to myself, I just discovered the greatest thing ever. I'd be able to retire twice if I keep going like this. And then we started hearing about some tariffs and some more tariffs. And then Canada was going to become the 51st state. And then we heard some more tariffs. Then we started having a war in the Middle East. Then we had all this other stuff. And right here, so this was my high. And then we hit a low of 49,000. I was down 30%. My 70,000 21,000 of it went away. And I was using 127% of my margin, and things were, but I was optimistic. You go back and watch this video, like I'm smiling and I'm having a good time and I'm entertaining myself, and people watch the video was also entertained. And some people like to see people fail, other people like to see people succeed. So no matter where you're at, these videos are for you, because I have my good weeks and I have my bad weeks. So anyhow, then it started coming back up 52,000, and then a little bit of a dip. Can't get it all back in 1 week. Then we back up again and kept going. And then back here, I don't know, about a month ago, I quit sweating because I was back to my original money at least. And then boy, this past week we had the Israel and Iran thing. We got some trade deals. We got nice weather. The birds are chirping. Like everything is going great. And so we're at 76,803. And then my margin is at 68,000. So if you look at my margin, that's about what I expected to be using in margin. However, I'm using almost 90% instead of 75%. So I will keep an eye on the market, and I'm expecting, just common sense tells me, there's going to be some red days coming up. And if we get a couple red days, not too red of a day, I may add another 100 shares of QQQI. So that's to be determined. This whole thing is comparing, is my ETFs going to do better than if I would have kept the rental house? So I've been keeping this sheet here of if I would have kept that house. So I was collecting $700 a month in rent on that house when we sold it. I was paying about $80 a month in insurance, $200 a month on average for real estate tax. And this column here would be the balance of, let's say, my checking account with the rent going in, the expenses going out. And there's no mortgage on this property. There was no mortgage on it. So this is how much cash I have. Over here is the equity. So I would have assumed that the equity would grow in that house at 4% per year. So that's $233 per month that equity would grow. Let's say here around the beginning of July, the end of July, we would have collected $3,780. We have that much in our checking account, and then our equity would be 72,000. Let's say if we were going to sell the house. Something everybody says every single week, and I usually mention this, but I don't mention this in every video because people that watch every video would hear this all the time. They're probably getting sick of me saying the same thing. But at the end of the year, I'm going to make a video. I'm going to take, let's say, the average maintenance cost for the past 3 years for this house. You divide it up and average it, and then include that in a video at the end of the year. So maintenance, repairs, etc., will be included in the last video of the year. I also know that if I sold this house, I would have fees. I'd have prorated real estate taxes I'd have to pay. I'd have closing costs. I'd have to pay a realtor if I went through a realtor, and I have legal fees and deed and title and all those good things. So this isn't taking consideration those types of fees. It's not taking into consideration any extra repairs or anything. It's just taking into consideration the fixed expenses, insurance, and real estate tax at this point. So yes, I do know that I have those other fees. And originally, I would have assumed that my ETFs would be doing so much better. It didn't matter like what the expenses were. I would have expected my ETFs just to be going great. I should be sitting at 90,000 right now, not 76,000, but it is what it is. And I'm satisfied with how it's going. You can't go straight up and make money every week. For the first time in several weeks, the ETFs are ahead by almost $1,000, a little bit over 900. So the rental house is sitting at 75,877, and the ETFs are sitting at 76,803. So one more thing I didn't take into consideration is income tax. So the ETFs that I buy, and that's pop back up here for a quick moment. So these ETFs all are very tax friendly because they use return of capital. I'm not going to go into return of capital a whole lot. I do have a video on each of these funds except for QQQI, but QQQI and SPYI are very similar. So if you watch SPYI video, you would get the same explanation about QQQI in general. But I talk about when I put these ETFs in my after tax accounts where I got to pay income tax on there, I like to look for tax friendly things in a thing called return of capital, which means that if it's 100% return of capital, I don't pay tax on it for that year. So let's say GIAX pays me 25% for the year, and I have 8,000 invested. So let's say I earn 2,000 bucks for the year, GIAX. If it's 100% return of capital, I don't pay tax on that. And then next year, if it's return of capital, I don't pay tax on that. I don't pay tax for the next 4 or 5 years. Once all the capital is returned to me, then I'll start paying tax. But then at that point, it'd be long-term capital gains tax, not ordinary income tax. So even then, it'd still be tax advantage to me. So I'm all good, fine, and dandy unless I sell, which if I hold these for, I'm not a tax expert. I'm an amateur actually, but if I hold these long enough, it'd still be long-term capital gains. The reason why I bought these, one of the reasons, besides the return, is that they use return of capital. They're advantageous for after-tax accounts. Now, if you have an IRA, Roth or traditional IRA, it doesn't matter. Your taxes, whatever the IRA rules are and your tax brackets, it is what it is. None of this return of capital would matter. These do matter in a brokerage account that you pay tax on. Anyhow, and subscribe and do all that good stuff. And hopefully I'm as equally as giddy and happy next week as I was this week. So we'll see you next week.